Warning, this is not a podcast for those who have got it together. We are men seeking answers to the questions that have plagued our mind. Can we be undefeated?
Well, man, I appreciate you taking the time. I want to make it like a semi-regular thing, you and I getting on here and doing this.
Yeah.
I actually, and I told you I had gotten pretty inconsistent with podcasts, and I was struggling because, just trying to find guests or people to be on there with me.
Sure.
And then after a time period, and I know we've kind of talked about this, but after a time period of me not really finding anybody, then I'm like, okay, I've got stuff to say. I'll at least record something. But then I would get start recording, and man, I just went blank. I was struggling, it felt weird to me not to have somebody to talk to,
Yes.
And I know there's people that do it. I have a hard time personally recording just me, talking on, without any interaction, without any, I told you I did radio one time, and it was like a Christian program, and my friend and I decided to do it. And I really struggled with it because I'd never done anything like that. And it's because I figured out later that I wasn't getting the feedback from the audience. If you're doing like if you're teaching or preaching or speaking, you get this feedback, and I think sometimes you tailor what you say or do by your feedback,
That's
and
true.
I was not getting any feedback. And now and it's funny, but I still struggled through it, even though I had my friend doing it. And years later, I figured out what it was for me. And was him and I literally sat at a desk and we faced this control panel.
Okay.
And we didn't even face each other, and I'm like, this is my friend, which I felt, fairly comfortable with. But yet I think the big realization later, I realized like the reason I struggled so much is because I'm just talking to this, this computer board.
Yeah.
Even though he was sitting right beside me.
Yeah.
And I think if I had to do again, I would let's turn around, let's sit and look at each other.
I would feel awkward like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't pick up on that as a problem. And he was fine with just doing it, just like we were doing it. But I wasn't. So.
Well, I did the DNA show on there in Elk City, and we sat across from each other. I ran the board, but I don't know how that would have worked. Not because we could communicate like that, And we had guests in every now and then, and but most of the time, I had laid out the topics we were going to discuss, But we had we had to play four classic rock songs in there, every 15 minutes, which worked out fine because we would introduce them, tell the little history behind the songs that we chose and stuff. So it worked out. But yeah,
and we actually have it scheduled. We're in the next couple of weeks before our September 16th event. We actually have it scheduled to be on the morning show, which is talk radio. It's out of Weatherford. So there, in Western Oklahoma, you have two main groups. You have a Elk City group, which they have KCO, and they have the Penny News, and I know they have probably a rock station, and I think one of their deals is called Hour of Power.
Yeah.
And so, but then you have the Weatherford group, which is, for people that don't know where we're at, but anyway, it's more east of here, about 45 minutes. And so we're going to be on their show, which theirs is a talk radio show. And again, I don't have the date in front of me, but then then we are going to be on, Chad Roper, him. I think it's not Chad Roper. No, he's not with them anymore.
No.
anyway, a brewer, you know him, Brewer, his last name's Brewer. But anyway, he's actually coming here. So I think it's going to be a recorded thing that may go on the radio, and we're going to talk about the event.
Good.
And I think that'll be great. So for you guys listening, if you haven't done it yet, we'd really love for you guys to go to our website, evenoneless.com. We're starting to build resources on there. It is still a work in progress, but I think the basics are there. The basics of who to contact through email or through phone, or how to link to our podcast, how to link to our social media. And I would just encourage you guys to do that. And then also this podcast, which is Positively Undefeated, you can find it on any of the podcasting apps that you use. Like, I have an iPhone, so I use Apple Podcast. It's easy to find, Positively Undefeated. Also Spotify, and that's a good one. You can find it on Spotify. You can find it on Google Podcast, and really any podcast platform that you use. And following this podcast, reviewing really helps us. Donnie, if you hadn't had a chance to do that, that's a good thing for us too. It's going on there, reviewing it. And I think the whole idea is kind of movement. We want to see some movement.
Yeah,
and then
that's true.
If you listen to, again, for these guys listening, if you listen to a podcast that really speaks to you, or you really enjoy the guest, or you really enjoy the message, then I think also sharing that to your social media and to friends, it's easy to do. Once you're inside the podcast app, it's easy to share across to people through text and to your social media, and those just help create movement. We do have a TikTok. It's even one less. That's our TikTok. I think we have one video on there right now, but of course you can also connect to me through Flying W Ranch. That's, I still have that one, and that we post a lot of stuff to that.
But your main website is, say that again. It's
evenoneless.com.
Evenoneless.com.
Yep. And Donnie, I think that, I gave Emily, if you guys don't listen, Emily's really kind of, I think she calls herself like community liaison. She's just really trying to help us, be organized, stay on track. For guys like you and me who are very busy and trying to do other things, she helps us. And so I gave her your number, with the idea of, like, one of the items, there's a few, but one of the items is, really getting some information on the website where people can connect to you, and also be able to, when you do social media stuff or podcasting stuff, where they can also connect to that. And so I gave her your number, but we did want to talk about, and I've kind of started every podcast like this, the last few, and that's, our event on September 16th. And we're calling it a mixer, but it's basically like an introduction event to the community. So if you are close to Western Oklahoma, or you live in Western Oklahoma, or you just want to come here, on September 16th at 6:00, we are having this event. It's really, even though, our organization is about suicide awareness, it's about mental health, it's about, our spirituality and growing in those areas. And we deal with business, and, there's like 4 or 5 focuses that we're really focused on. And even though we have these focus, which is really growth, it's like growing, getting better. It's like understanding who you are. It's like understanding who you are in Christ. It's multitude of things that it's like, I keep calling it a tool belt of different things that will really help you, maybe if you're struggling. So this event is not some sad event, but it's actually going to be a lot of fun. We've got a food truck coming. We have a wonderful musician. Her name is I Am Rachel. That's what you call her. Her name's Rachel. And if you look at on social media like Facebook, it's I Am Rach, RACH. She's phenomenal. And she's going to be there. And then we're going to do like a fun auction. So we've got 5, 6 plus items that we're going to auction off. And those are really just for fun, to enjoy the evening. and then we're going to hear some stories. And I think that it's a socializing event. It can definitely be a come and go as you want to event. And Donnie, you're going to be there. And I think that I just want to invite people. I want to invite people to that event because Donnie, I think we talked about a little bit, but it's great I don't want to discourage anybody from coming from what I'm about to say, because I think don't miss an event. If you're able to come in Elk City, then come on. But I think where we're going as an organization is we're going to Midland, Texas next. And then I believe we're going to Corpus Christi after that. And then I believe, I don't know necessarily it's in this exact order, but we're going to Ardmore. We have one of our board members lives in Ardmore. It's a big area. It's real close to the Texas-Oklahoma border. And I think so that's the other place. And really, Donnie, I would like for us to discuss, let's say that whole process takes us a year. I don't know that it would take that long, or maybe it takes longer. But I would like for us to discuss is coming to your area.
Oh, yeah.
As part of our agenda, which kind of, yes, we would cater it to the community that we're going to, but I think that it's kind of duplicating what we're talking about and be able to record those and where people can't attend, they can actually, watch the video online and be able to see what we're talking about as well. And then it helps us with our contact and our message in the future. But I would love to really, go to Florida and us just kind of work out the hows and the whys and, where and all that stuff. But I think, anyway, put that in the back of your mind as, okay, maybe that's something we do.
Yeah, that'd be good. Get some country music entertainment.
Yeah, I bet you do. I bet you have some connections there.
So that'd be a good thing.
Yeah, Donnie, if you have real, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's the real deal in the music business. Suicides is, that's not that we're just focusing on that, but I don't know it was a national news, but I see. Someone in my daughter's Curb Records, connected all that, and she just went to a memorial service last week for someone that had her life, and had everything, and married to a superstar, and it was no one expected it, and so people just they have those days, they have those times, just so anyway, my point is there's no one exempt from that.
Yeah, absolutely. I've told you this, Donnie, but like as we go into this journey more, whenever my cousin, that was the last kind of suicide. I've had 3 family members, my grandfather, my 2 cousins commit suicide, and a couple of friends and coworkers. But when my cousin committed suicide, the last one, which was about 2 years ago, I, just blasted. Really, it was my way of healing. I just put a bunch of stuff out on social media, about it. It wasn't a poor me thing. I was like, this has got to stop. And looking back, I probably had a little anger, there. I was just mad, upset, mad, looking for any way to basically just to get it out there. And some release is a good way to put it. I was just looking for release something. And, I kind of, looking back, I might have done it a little different, part of me, but then the other part of me is like, I think it was effective the way it was. But I from that point till now, so let's say like 2 years, with us just starting this organization, like, a few months ago, I have been shocked by the people who've reached out, and it's exactly what you just said. It's like people that I thought I had no clue that this affected their lives. And I'm blown away by it. I think I told you this, that recently the state of Oklahoma put out it's kind of like a map. and it talks about the number of suicides in each region. And Western Oklahoma is through the roof.
Wow.
And, and I know but as a state, the state of Oklahoma is through the roof. You know what I mean? And I just interviewed, in fact, her podcast came out on Monday where her mother had committed suicide, her brother had committed, she lives right here in Elk City. And I'm just blown away by the number of people that are hurting, that, because that's the horrible thing about suicide. You have two sides of it. You have the person that committed suicide or is thinking about it or has attempted it, that person who's struggling. And then you have the family and the aftermath that's just rippling. And it's like, that's the hard part. It's like, when I was listening to her, I could not fathom my mother and my brother committing suicide. It just couldn't fathom it, And if you're a family or a friend of that situation, I had this in my mind for a long time, that if you could see what I saw, which is my first cousin, like everything that happened in our family, you would never even consider suicide. But that is not true, because number one, his brother went and did it too. Yeah. And then, I was struggling with suicidal thoughts and struggling still. So it's like that, you think that is a preventative measure, like once you see it, but it's not a preventative. It's not at all.
Well, I think it's I don't know if you're calling this a ministry, I don't know, but in the ministry terms, I think it's a great ministry. I think it's a great outreach, because people, I remember, and I was in high school, I was probably the 10th grade, and one of my best buddies, we called him Buckwheat, but his dad committed suicide. Now, we're in a rural area, and I bet no one ever even talked to Danny about it. He goes home and he finds his dad had shot himself, and there was no, and yet, it must sound all that he was carrying inside. He was, his mother was gone. So he, as a normal teenager, you're going to think, well, it must have been my fault, or I wasn't worth him living. I mean, those are natural processes, but you didn't have those things. You didn't have that to, and it's kind of neat that y'all have a place where people can listen, they can talk, and they can also contact and get help. And, I think it's really cool. I really appreciate it, all that you've done. And people out there that listening, there is no ministry that you set up. There's no ministry that you set up that's not a lot of work. It's just a lot of work. It's a lot of time. If you're investing the time in what I call eternal worth and value stuff, and that's what you're doing. And so, in my life, I only recall one time that I had suicidal thoughts, but I will say this, they were real. Yeah. It was someone sitting in the room with me telling me to take my life. It was like, whoa, it was so real. And in my case, it was a spiritual thing that was happening to me. And I called my neighbor who her husband had committed suicide. And I started talking to her. I didn't tell her what was going on. She picked up on it. She says, Donnie Lyles, now you listen to me. And she kind of jolted me. She kind of jolted me out of where my state of mind was. And it was a really, really helpful. So I know that those things are real. And some people have contemplated for a long time. In my case, it was just that couple hours. But it was weird, Burl. It was weird that here I had everything going in a sense, but I was close to 50 years old. And it was like, oh. It was weird. And it makes you have understanding of those who do, that go through that battle to some degree. There's always, as you know, way, way more than I do. There's always lots of different reasons that people do it.
There is lots of paces, and that's part of the hard part is that, like, I keep saying it, but I feel like there's two different groups. The group that has never thought about that in their entire life. And I have friends like that again, I tell them that and they kind of look at me strange. Like, they want to show compassion, they want to understand, but they just don't, and then you have the people who completely understand, completely. And I think that, what I keep really the thought that keeps coming to my mind is, number one, you don't know what's in the future. In other words, part of it is that you may not ever have had that thought, but it could come up. You mentioned at 50 years old, there's, you never know. And the next thing is that, man, you may never struggle with it, but your kid does, or your wife, or your husband, or your brother, or your sister. And I think that that's the message that I think is important to also communicate, that yes, I do. I can, like when people say they struggle with drugs, I've never struggled with drugs.
Yeah.
And so I do. There's an element that, yes, I may not be able to relate completely. But I love the way it's said. I've heard it said that don't look at our differences, look at our similarities. Mm-hmm. And I think that when you start realizing that, man, there's nothing more heartbreaking than seeing your kids struggle. There's absolutely nothing more heartbreaking. And, I mean, it could happen. If it hasn't happened yet, it could. It could be a struggle for somebody very close to you. Man, I wanted to ask you, I'm going to paraphrase this, and it's basically the idea that our growth and our well-being, our spirit, like how we feel, and I don't really love the word feel, but basically our being is contingent upon our spiritual progress or health. Mm-hmm. And I'm, whenever we started this organization, of course, I reached out to you, and you're gracious to say, yes, I want to be a part of this. I want to help, and really talking about the spiritual side of things. Sure. I hear a lot about it. In fact, I interviewed somebody earlier, Donnie, on the podcast, and great story, just great testimony story. And now he talks a lot about, like, basically growing spiritually, the connection spiritually. And then when you hear something like that, really our overall health, our overall well-being is contingent upon our spiritual growth. And I see the truth in that, meaning that if that connection is so important spiritually. But I think that a lot, even me at this time, sometimes I listen to these testimonies of like how God's working in people's life, and like on a daily basis. And it feels a little bit distant because I don't know I want to go automatically to a formula. Yeah. You know what I mean? And maybe it's just the way my mind works with business, and, I have an accounting degree, so maybe it goes with that. Yeah. But I want to automatically go to the formula. Like I think we're scared to say this, but like, what's the formula? What do I need to do? What's the list? What's the something? So I know how to, like, really grow spiritually, how to maintain that connection, with God, to feel like that, you hear a lot about praying. You need to pray every day. And it's like, I don't think that there's a Christian or a person out there who would disagree that praying is important. Yeah. But I think we struggle with that. And I just want to know your thoughts on those things.
Well, I do believe that our spiritual man, I'll call it our spiritual man, that it, the scriptures talks about grow in the grace and knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ. Okay. So there's an element of grow, but our problem is we do get the formulas told to us. Like I went 30 years, in my circle back then, the big deal was having a quiet time. All right. Nothing wrong with that, but having a quiet time, get up early, you have your Bible, you have your prayer time, you try to spend 30 minutes or an hour, whatever. And so I went 30 years and never missed a day. All right. Mm-hmm. And then, and those things are bad, but then I once I started understanding the new covenant, I remember telling my church when I was pastor, I said, you know what? don't worry about why you have to get up in the morning and do it. Why even have to? I said, there's a lot of people I wouldn't want to meet with first thing in the morning, so God shouldn't have to.
Right. Yeah.
And so because we make it, and like also in the circle I was in years ago was going out and telling people about Jesus. That was a big deal. You had your visitation nights, you had all that stuff. And the problem, and yet when Jesus said, go ye therefore into all the world, really what it says in Greek language is as you go. Now, what's he saying? Just let it be part of your life. Don't make it, don't make it like, okay, we got to do this now. And I think that a lot of people don't enjoy the journey because they feel like the journey has too many obligations in it. Mm-hmm. And so they're afraid to even meet new people because, oh man, they're going to expect me to tell them about Jesus. That's what my circle tells me. What did you tell? I've heard people do that. What did you tell them about Jesus? I just met the guy, but there's an expectations of that. And I think different people have different growth things. I do, for me, the thing that has always been a foundation for me in my growth has been reading the scriptures. It's been something that's been very important to me. But I wish that people had a foundation of understanding of the new covenant before they start in the scriptures. I mean, for the last number of years, somebody becomes a Christian, I tell them right up front, don't be reading the Old Testament. I said, listen, read the New Testament because the Old Testament's types and shadows. And why read it? Why look at a type and shadow when you've got the real? Just read about how Jesus did stuff. And this, that's what I push people to do, or not push people, but encourage people to do. And, but I'm going to, one of the podcasts I'm going to do is going to be about praying because a lot of churches used to, I don't know if they still do, but they have prayer meetings, Wednesday night prayer meetings. So it's nearly like you had to go somewhere to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think that prayer is something. When I used to travel with my kids, anytime we went on vacation, anytime we went anywhere, we saw a wreck or an accident, I just verbalized, prayed for them right then. I just, just prayed for them because they're in a critical moment. They're in a situation. And it's not like it's what if? Here's my question. What if God moves based on how we pray? It's what if. I mean, that's a lot of pressure on us. But what if? And what gets my attention is in the scriptures, Paul always talks about praying for people. I'm praying for you. And we're talking about someone, after Jesus. And I think that what God does many times is he drops people into our heart because I basically believe prayer is just agreeing with God what's going on. Mm-hmm. And that's the only thing the disciples asked Jesus, teach us how to pray. And they didn't ask him to teach them anything else, but they knew this guy, there's something special about praying because he does a lot of it. So Jesus teach us how to pray. And then he just, our Father who art in heaven, we all know that. He said, may it be on earth as it is in heaven. I think that sometimes our praying is we're just agreeing with God that what he's feeling about this situation, this person, we just want to see it become reality. But I think it can't be a burden to us. It can't be. It has to be just a way of life. Just you go and, like, I don't know if you saw that paramedic in that helicopter that was killed down around Miami 2 days ago. Well, that's my son-in-law's brother. And we all spent Christmas together. We had, half the room was black, half the room was white, filled up. And it was just fantastic because I've known this family for over 30 years. So what happens? You're definitely going to pray about those situations because it's right there on the TV. It's, but I believe also God will bring people to your mind or situations to your mind because he wants you to pray for that person. He wants you to pray for that situation. And to me, that's part of growth. When you realize you have a connection with God at any time. There's nothing you're going to do or not do. I understand you're going to have Eric Easter. Sometime you're going to do a podcast.
Yeah, I've already done it.
Oh, you've already done it?
Yeah, it hadn't published yet, but yeah.
fantastic. All right. We had him on our radio show. Of course, I've known Eric, because I lived out there. And it was so many people had tuned in that the computer locked up. And it's great. But he said that, well, it's his story. But those of you someday, make sure you get to listen to his story. I won't tell his story.
Yep, it should be next week, I would think.
Just how he was reaching out to God and recognized God, even in his, in his lifestyle. And I think people do that. And growing, I don't know. Sometimes, Paul deals with, you ought to be mature by now, you should be. And, but my problem I've had with church is they do have a formula. They do have the churches I've been a part of. It's kind of like, if you fulfill these or not done this, then you must be a mature Christian, that type of thing. And I don't think that's true. I just don't think that's true at all. And the problem with church life, or even with Christian circles, is the word validation. We kind of find out, what does this group validate? Then we have a tendency to become what they like, so we can get validation from that group. And that is that's sad to me. That's just sad, because I think most churches, are like a social club more than a real New Testament church. And they've decided a number of things that they're going to say, this is what's important to us. And this is what, if you cross the line in this, then that's bad. And, but I just think the growth of a Christian is keep focusing on Christ, just keep focusing, keep doing it. And, I don't like I used to. I don't read the Bible every day, but I'll say the Bible reads me every day. I mean, I'll have scriptures come up all the time that I have known, that I've memorized, that have been part of my life, and I always get something out of it. But I'm not necessarily saying that that's a guaranteed growth if you just read your Bible every day. But I do think when it says grow in the grace and knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ, well, how do I know how I get grace? The Bible tells you, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. It's just realizing, I think it's a healthy thing on a regular basis to say, God, I just want you to know I need you today. I need you, I think it's healthy. And I've got 5 kids and they're all adults, but it does something to me when any of them say, hey, Dad, I need you for this. There's something it does to me as a dad to know my son, my daughter still needs me. That means something to me. And I think God as a father, that means something to him. When we just say, no, I need you. My prayer usually every day is, Father, I'm counting on you. I just am. I'm just counting on him. Even if something like doing this podcast, I'm counting on you. If it's someone, whatever I'm doing, I drive for my son's band, and we were in North Carolina and driving out there. I count on him. I just count on you to keep me safe, keep me alert, everyone around me. And now if something were to happen, that didn't mean that he dropped the ball, but I know in my heart, I need to know I'm counting on him. And then growing the grace, and to me is just, we heard, I watched the presidential debate, and 2 times one of the candidates said, with all humility, he said, with all humility, and I'm saying,
right.
You just blew that one for me. You just went down 10 notches right there. Yeah. With all humility, I said, that's not how humility works. And because anyway, but I don't want, I think it's dangerous for people to say, God, just humble me. No, the Bible says humble yourself. Just humble yourself. And you have opportunities all the time to humble yourself. You just do. And regardless of what it is.
The world humbles you.
Do what?
I said the world has a way.
The world will humble you. And that's, the world will. And then when it says grow in the grace and knowledge, most every time in the New Testament and the Old Testament, when the Hebrew or Greek word is used, a knowledge is to know. It's not a knowledge about, in the Old Testament, the scripture says they perish because lack of knowledge. And see, there's a whole deal. One of the first podcasts I'm going to be doing is your view of God, because your view of God determines everything about you. And if it's off, then it might be off. And, and I think that I won't get into all that now, but I think there's two movies that really impacted our view of God. I think they've impacted us. I was in Bolivia speaking to leaders in Bolivia, third world country. And I asked them, I said, have y'all ever seen the movie, The 10 Commandments? They all raised their hand. Yeah. And
I remember you talking about that. Yeah.
The movie, The 10 Commandments, it gives a bad impression of who God is. It just does. But in my podcast, I'll go into detail. But anyway, and so one of the things that a lot of churches are about is knowing. That's why they have Bible study. It's always, you can't have a small group without a Bible study type of thing. And yet it says, my people perish because lack of knowledge. It's the same Hebrew word used in Genesis where it says, and Adam knew Eve and bore a son. Was he didn't know about her. He didn't read a book. Oh, so this is how you reproduce. No, he intimately knew her. So God said, my people are perishing because they don't intimately know me. Yeah. And that's a big difference than just knowing about. So I don't know, I don't have a formula, and I know you don't have a formula, but there have been times where Jesus said, put your hands on the plow and don't look back. There have been times I've had to say, Lord, just tie my hands to the plow. Just tie me up, because I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back. And just, looking at the author perfecter of our faith, and to me, that's just been something. When I found myself swaying off, it was when I stopped realizing it was all about Jesus. Mm-hmm. I started out, it was all about Jesus, because I know that God is really high on his son. He said, I've given him a name above all other names. He's the one said, he's my guy. He's my son. And that's who, and yet the system can sometimes take you off that, can even to the point where you worship your Bible and not the author of it, that type of thing. There's always little, the road in Christianity is, there's a slippery slope, and it's easy to slide away from that. It just is. And I think if people really stay just focused on Christ and just enjoy the journey, I listened to someone, I'll be careful, while I was driving, I listened to someone as a live preaching. All right. Now, so I'm just going to listen to this while I'm driving Sunday. And so I'm listening and watching, and as that person was speaking, it dawned on me, if you're ever in a service and you start feeling bad about yourself, those aren't probably the words that you're supposed to be hearing. Because God doesn't do that to us. When there's a pressure that, you're not reaching up, or you need to do more, you need to, that, because I remember reading through the New Testament years ago, for the sole purpose, why did they ever have church? Why did they come together? Why take your time to meet with a group of people, whether it be in a house church or whatever? And every time it was to be encouraged and built up. It just was. And I wish churches would focus on that more, because like you said a while ago, the world's tough enough on us. We don't need the church to be tough on us. We need to be built up on a Sunday or Saturday or a small group, or you've got a couple of people you're meeting with or whatever, to be built up. That should be an encouragement place to go out and change the world you live in, to make a difference, to make a dent in that world. And that's just something I watch. And that I was listening, and I was a lot of great things were said. A lot of great things were said, but it still had that element,
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately, it seemed like it's just been in my mind every day. And I'm hoping it's the Holy Spirit bringing it to me. I hope it is. And you remember when Jesus said, "You have heard it said, but I say unto you." You have heard it said, but I say unto you. And I'm afraid that a lot of Christians have heard it said, but they haven't heard the other, but I say unto you. Because Jesus referred to things that were in the Old Testament. He's referring to that. You've heard it said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth, but I say unto you. And I'm afraid that just too many people are just, they've heard it said.
Right.
They've heard.
Well, there's a place I'm paraphrasing, but there's a place in the Bible that talks about that basically tradition and your traditions and your kind of your ways of that you've learned will pretty much kill you, because it's like if your whole version of God is based on what your parents taught you and what the preacher that growing up taught you and what their parents taught them, and you just continue that road, then all of it becomes secondhand. We have little fun games where, we say something in a group of people and it goes around the circle. And by the time it gets to the end, it's completely different. And we laugh and we know what the point is. And, we do these exercises and then, to clear communication, which you think about it, it's like I've always said, it's like we preach and talk about even in work how important communication is. We put it at this very top priority. Like we say that with a marriage, the communication needs to be with your kids at work, blah, blah, blah. But honestly, we don't know how to communicate. And I think a lot of it, even in that work scenario, comes secondhand. It's like we're told this by someone else. And we, I think about, I think it's a great analogy that I think you and I talked about it, and if not, you heard about it, where I was doing this 75 hard, which, the whole point of it was it's a mental toughness deal. But the reason I bring it up is because, man, I cannot tell you the misinformation that I got about this. As soon as I told somebody that I was doing this, I got calls, I got texts, and really what they're saying is, I can't believe you're doing this. This is stupid. This is not good for you, all these things. But what it came down to is this is not good for you.
Yeah. Okay.
And really, it was the farthest thing from the truth.
Isn't that something?
The truth is it was very good for me and I needed it. And, it was something that not everybody needed it, but I needed it.
You needed it.
But it was that fallacy or whatever was based on wrong information. That's just simple as that. It's like,
now, what do you determine? Let me interrupt you. What do you determine that it was good for you?
Well, because I looked at the result as we went. I look at the outcome. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that the outcome, you mentioned an outcome. If you go to church and you feel sad and you feel guilty and you feel this lowly feeling when you leave church, I agree with you that there's something wrong.
Yeah.
And that's the outcome. When you look at it in a very logical way, the outcome of you going to this service was you feel depressed, you feel guilty, you feel whatever. You feel like you don't measure up, you're not good enough.
Yeah.
And so when I think about this, not just at the end, it was nice to finish it after 75 days, but I'm talking about on day 10. On day 5, on day 20. And I really have to credit my daughter because she I'd tried it before and again, based on really not really great information, not really true information. And I failed it. And she said, "Hey, Dad, let me send you the podcast of the guy who developed it."
Okay.
And I listened to the podcast and I was like, wow, I heard it straight from the source.
Yeah.
And whenever I heard it straight from the source, there's two things that happened from that. I hadn't started it when I listened to it. this time, meaning I tried it before after, not having the correct information. Well, it motivated me. Mm-hmm. And I think that's such a great point. It's like, it motivated me.
Yeah.
It like made me want to know more, to seek more, to find out more. And then the other thing about it is that it really eased my mind on the things that were incorrect, because to give you an example of that, and I don't want to, I've done podcasts talking about it. So, but to give you an example is that there's this idea that you basically, think about it. If you're not working out any, and then all of a sudden you're going to working out 45 minutes a day. So that's an hour and a half a day. If I told you, Donnie, starting tomorrow, you're going to work out an hour and a half, I need you to split it up and work, you're saying in the morning and evening, I assume, and automatically there's negative. Because, but if I told you, that, hey, man, you can just go for a walk.
Yeah.
That changes the subject. You see what I'm saying? And I think that happens with like really our understanding is because you have this tradition, you have what you've been told. And again, like I laugh at my experiences as growing up because there's two sides to it. One, those experiences, no matter how negative they were, I'm talking about with church and religion and God, there was a lot of negative, but there's one thing that was permeated is that I have still, like I always wanted to seek God.
Yeah.
So God used something that wasn't that great and turned it for good. He really did. So I think that's a great reminder that God is in control. Yeah. But then the other side of it is like, man, really what it comes down to it's like when you make it your own, when you get to that point where it's very personal at whatever age in your life, like I think a lot of people have this story like I did. I went to church camp and, I ended up going up to the front of the altar and then I went home and I got baptized and, I do believe I was saved at that point. But then the next summer, we went back to church camp. I went back to the altar. You know why? Because I felt like that I had made a lot of mistakes, sinned. I hadn't done very good. So I felt like I needed to go back up there. Then I go back and rededicate my life and get baptized again. Yeah. And really, if I had to like summarize my youth experience as a Christian, it was that vicious cycle. Yes, I believe in God. And I believe that was real. That really happened.
Yeah.
Okay. In other words, I really became a Christian. Yeah. But then I'm looking at my track record and my performance and I'm like, man, it's not very good. Yeah. So I need to, what I was being taught as a kid, not everybody's taught like this, but this was my, this was my traditions is that, man, you didn't do it right. It wasn't good enough. You need to go back and you need to rededicate. Another way to say it, like redouble your efforts. Yeah. Again, nobody would say that, but now looking back, that's the way I felt. Like I've got to double up because either I've missed it, I'm not praying. I knew like this is as a kid, like, and again, a kid who, like, if you had asked me what I was going to be when I grew up, I would say a preacher. That's what I would say. Yeah. I would sit in front of my room and preach to myself.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And that's what I wanted to be. That's what I thought. So, God was important. Yeah. But automatically I'm like, I'm not praying correctly. I'm doing something wrong. Yeah. I kind of grew up in a really dysfunctional home. Mm-hmm. So I like internalized all those things that, obviously God, is telling me that I'm not doing something right. Yeah. Because I felt like I wouldn't even know if I'd said this, but I felt like I wasn't living the right life, mm-hmm. That I wasn't doing it right. Yeah. And, so I'm trying to combine what I'm learning about God and with my own family experiences as a kid. And I'm like, I don't fit in. We were talking about this earlier, Donnie, and there's so much truth to this. It's like, especially when you look at like addiction of alcohol or drugs, or you just look at people that are really struggling. When you listen to their testimony, it's almost the same start, and it doesn't matter who it is. And the start is something like this. I felt like I did not fit in. I felt like I was weird. Felt like I was different. I felt socially I couldn't fit in, or something to the effect of I did not fit in.
Yeah.
Okay. And what happens is they look for a way to fit in. Yeah. And when they look for a way to fit in, normally some people turn to some really good looking stuff to fit in, but it becomes like almost like a people pleasing thing. And then some people may look toward substance to fit in. And I remember the first time I drank when I was like 16. And to me, still to this day, that memory, I can tell you, we were cruising down the drag.
Sure.
We were having I was having my first beer. We were listening. I can tell you, we listened to Guns N' Roses.
Oh my goodness!
It's like this summer, great teenage story, right?
You're in now.
and you know what? It is still to this day, despite everything else, that's still a good memory for me. Like I didn't even love really hard rock really, and at that time, Guns N' Roses was like some of the hardest rock you could listen to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my friends thought I was crazy, other that weren't involved. And but my point is that you could I look at it as a great memory, but I also could see it from the other side. That's the first time you really drank. First time I dipped snuff, which I still do it today. First time, and you can go on and on. The music, that wasn't good for you, whatever. But you know what now that I've realized is that really what happened is the first time I felt like I fit in.
There you go. Isn't that something?
And you build that becomes a tradition, and it becomes what you build. It's like your foundation at that point. Like, I don't feel like I fit in. I don't feel like, all these things. And then now I do. And that really starts to kind of define your life because, and again, you could have no trouble. Let's say you don't have any problem with alcohol, or you don't have any problem with any of it, but it could be people pleasing. It could be completely a bunch of others. It could be churchy activities.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that, that what this verse is kind of saying is that those traditions have a way of just really, I said a while ago that it's like can kill you, but another way is bondage, really, because you become attached to those things. You're like, this is, and those things are all great until they're not great anymore. You know what I mean? Until they become a problem. And when I'm hearing you talk about it, it's like, man, those traditions and those, they could absolutely, seem like the right thing. But that was my experience as a young Christian is like repeat. And to tell you, in other words, go back, rededicate your life, row back, fix it again, ask for forgiveness, do it. And I'll tell you one more part.
And they call that growing in God. That's not growing.
Let me tell you how much of this affected my life. So at some point as an adult, I really
let me say, I was not on the good side of that for a long time. I was, encouraging that rededication and stuff because I didn't know better. All right, as a youth pastor. But now I know better. I go back.
Well, and I was going to tell you this last part of the story is that this tells you how much those traditions will affect you, even when you have you felt like you've been freed from it. So at some point in my adult life, I really start to understand the grace message. I understand that whole process is ridiculous. That's not how God works, right? And I grab a hold of it. I always laughingly say, my aunt can verify this when you meet her, that I got so excited about the grace message that I prepared a PowerPoint for my family presentation. And at a family gathering, I presented this PowerPoint presentation and they all looked at me like I was crazy.
Yeah, sure.
And in other words, I was very zealous over this message. That's how much it affected me.
Yeah.
Too zealous, but it's funny because my oldest son, he goes to church camp one year. different church camp, different deal. And he comes back and he says, Dad, I'm going to get baptized on Sunday. And I'm like, what? You've already been baptized.
Yeah.
And how I knew that is because the church we'd gone to before we'd moved, is a very grace-based church, and he had gotten saved, and they had asked me if I wanted to baptize him as his father, and I was like, yeah. So I remember the story, and I was like, it was an honor to baptize your own son.
Yeah.
And that church that I went to and I was a part of, that was important to them. Let the parent do it. It was important to them. And some people would disagree with that, but you get the point. It was a very moving moment.
Yeah.
And I said, son, you remember when we did that, right? And he's like, yeah, I remember. And I said, do you believe you were saved when that happened? I mean, not the baptizing part, but I mean, on that time period.
Sure.
And he's like, yeah, I believe it. And I'm like, you understand that what baptizing was, it was just, we're just telling publicly, it's like celebrating what you've done. And he was like, yeah, I know. And he agreed with all these truths. And I'm like, but why are we doing it again? And I said, son, if you want to go do it again, I'll be there and I'll watch, and I'll be happy, and I'll be happy for you. But I just want you to understand why you're doing it again. And you know what his answer was? Because he felt pressured.
Exactly.
He felt pressured to do it again. And you know what it did in me? It brought up anger.
Oh, sure.
It brought up, like, I wanted to go march down to the youth pastor and like have a conversation. Yeah. That's what it did to me. And I didn't do that. Thank God. I didn't do that. But let me tell you, like, it would have been the wrong thing to do, because that was my experiences and my wound that had been reopened. You know what I mean? And so I said,
he has pressure because the whole system was, you're successful based on nickels and noses, it's a pressure to perform. It's a pressure to have nickels and noses, and so he went ahead and got baptized.
So I said, how we ended it was, after we had that discussion, I said, again, son, if you want to go do that again, I'm supporting you. I'll be there. I'll support you. But I just want you to understand that when you did this the first time, when you got saved, all of it worked. It was right.
Yeah.
And I said, if you choose to do it, then understand that. If you choose not to do it, I've got your back too, because I felt like he would get pressure, and he chose not to. And again, on his own, and I let him choose on his own.
That's big.
And it was big. And I thought, but I knew that I felt like he needed my support either way. Yeah. Because if he chose not to do it, which he did, then I felt like unintentional, but he would get this pressure that, why aren't you doing this when we already said we're going to do this, and it all worked out in the end. But I think that it's so important to realize that, like, for me, it's not just talking about my spiritual life, like my experience with God and church and all that stuff, but it also affects really every aspect of your life. Because if you don't feel like you're ever good enough, you don't feel like what God did for you was enough, then you are, you've heard it said, but you feel like you're on this spiritual treadmill. And it's not just spiritual, but you're on this treadmill of performance. I've got to perform. And man, I think for me, in the last couple of years, it's really realizing that it's not about my performance. It's not about my performance. It's about his performance.
Exactly.
And I was going to mention this a while ago, but it really, for me, what I've realized, and I didn't love these words because, again, it sounded churchy or whatever, but I realized there's got to be this willingness. Some people say surrender. Mm-hmm. Those are fine words, but I think that for me, like, understanding, like, I've got to want to seek him and allow him to be the Lord of my life. Yeah. You know what I mean? In other words, if I'm looking to people to say how good I'm doing as a Christian, mm-hmm. if I'm comparing to other Christians and say, why am I not like Donnie? or why am I not like so-and-so? Or why don't I pray like that? Really, it's like I'm looking to other people to validate who I am.
Yes. Yeah.
And really, I started to realize here again lately that validation, that seeking only can come from one source, and that source has got to be God. It's got to be Jesus. It's got to be like, if my life is an utter failure, then it has to be that like the same thing that I give. It's your will, not mine.
Yeah.
God, if you want this to work, I have to depend on you in every area of my life and allow you to work through me and leave the results in your hand. You know what I mean? Leave the results in your hand. If
That's
I think
right.
about our organization, even one less, man, the Burl who is a leader, the Burl who is a go-getter, and I'm those things. I'm a go-getter. Like
Sure.
I don't talk, but let me tell you, that Burl wants to sit around and measure and define and, how many people listen and how many people come. That's what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Back to like the measuring sticks or these indicators. But what I'm really trying to, or I think God's impressing upon my heart, is that leave those results in my hand. Yeah. You let me do with this as I want to do with it. And it may be just me and you talking and a few people listening on the podcast.
Sure.
That may be it.
Yeah.
But what I've done is I even though it's different, it's a different look, but I found myself in my adult life, even understanding the grace message, is going back to that treadmill and saying, I'm going to basically do it my way. I think because, God, he's up there. He's got plenty of stuff to do. I can handle this. I'll do this. And it ends in utter, not just failure, like in the world's eye, but just failure, period, because it's not what he wanted, and I don't know. Does that make any sense whatsoever?
Yeah, it does. As you were talking, going back to when you were younger, your son, all that, the scripture comes to mind where Paul said, who's taking you away from the simplicity of the gospel?
Mm-hmm.
It's Jesus made it so easy and so simple so that it could be simple. And so it is. That's why I told you last time we talked that I'm finally to the place is, if you believe the story, you're in, period. That's it. Because anything beyond that is something that you've done. Anything beyond that, because used to there was a big deal about praying the prayer type of thing. Well, you don't put your faith in a prayer, so, and I just, this, and it's a mentality of, that I remember when I first started understanding what you and I are calling the new covenant stuff and the grace message and things. Mm-hmm. I remember that you look at things in a wrong way. My boy, he was 10 years old, Stephen, and 10, 11 years old, and he had a lawn service. All right. And I would go with him because, we had a weed eater, you had an edger, and we, had a mower, and I went with him and he mowed. He's probably had to be about 9, because when he was 10 is when I changed, but about 9. And he mowed an acre lawn. All right. And I did all the weeding, edging, all that stuff. And it's in Florida. We go down on the road. I said, all right, Steve, what do you think? He said, it looks great. Here's the legal mentality. Here's the law mentality. Okay. Here's the non-grace mentality. I said, well, it does, son, but let me show you something. And it breaks my heart every time I tell the story. So I take my little boy, 9 years old, has done a beautiful job on this acre lawn, $1 million home, beautiful. I take him up there and I point out one blade of grass that was standing that he missed.
Mm-hmm.
One blade of grass. I said, son, you missed this. Mm-hmm. And that's what law is. It points out the one thing you didn't do right. It points out the thing, and so when my thinking, I remember when God just started opening up Hebrews to me and stuff, I would pray, Father, the things that I don't think right? Would you change that? Because metanoia, the Greek word in the New Testament, repent, is to rethink. And that's what God's trying to get us to rethink. And I remember I was in North Carolina, and there's about 19 or 20, most all of them were pastors. And I asked them, I said, why did God destroy? Here's the difference in mentality. Why did God destroy? I can't wait to do this on the podcast because I said, why did God destroy Sodom and Gomorrah? They all go to because of sin, because they were so corrupt. I said, that's not true. See, the difference in mentality changes how you look at things. I said, he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah because Abraham couldn't find 10 righteous people. That's it. Because he said, well, if I find 50, and he came down, if I find just 10, yeah, I'll save this place. He couldn't find 10 righteous people. It was about non-righteous being there. It wasn't about the sin. But see, it's a mentality, how you look at things different. And that's what grace will do. Once you see it, and now my son could miss a whole 4x4 section and I wouldn't say anything about it. I wouldn't say a word about it because I'd recognize what he did do right. And I believe the nominal Christian, my dad was a nominal Christian. He didn't go to church for years and years because he grew up in a church that's hellfire and brimstone. And if you did this and everything they told you cannot do, he did. Okay. So he told my aunt years later, he said, well, I just made my bed hard. I got to sleep in it. That was his mentality. He didn't know he had a grace to get that God's grace was there. He didn't know. But my father, I believe the nominal Christian, 85% of the stuff that they do are righteous deeds. I just do. But I remember when he passed away, someone in my family said, what a wasted life. And it just burned. Because they associated you're successful if you go to church every week or 3 times or give you money to church, all that. And yet my dad, we do righteous things. Brushing your teeth is a righteous deed. You're taking care of your teeth. It can be as simple as that. And I believe the nominal Christian, 85% of stuff that they do are great deeds. I just believe that. So far today, I have not stolen from anybody. I haven't shot anybody. I haven't lied to anybody. You see, we don't look at it like that. We'll go all day long and then tell a lie, for instance. And that's what we take to bed with us. Yeah, I went 23 and a half hours, never told a lie, but and that's what the law does to you. The law will take the life from you. It just will. And when we're focused on that and we emphasize that, and the law is very controlling, and that's why the law was put there. The law was given to us to protect the weak, the crippled, and the lame. It was there to protect because these people were killing people there, but they had no. All right, if you take an eye, you got to give an eye. It was because God wasn't really involved in their lives. They didn't know God. He didn't know them. Moses was the leader, and he didn't know the voice of God. He goes to the mountain, and he goes, well, who's that? He didn't know. That's the leader. And but where I am is, don't focus on your downfalls. Don't focus. Just recognize that you're doing a lot of things that are right. And when you understand that, you can enjoy the journey more. I just think condemnation and guilt is one of the worst things that's in life. And I just think that's where, when I thought about taking my life, is because I had messed up in life. I had made some mistakes. I made some, and people found out about it. And I felt an outcast just like that. And I was the pastor of the church. I was, just a few months before that, I baptized 31 high school and college kids one Sunday. But all of a sudden, felt like an outsider. I felt like and what happens? You don't ever focus on the good you've done. You didn't focus on, all the other things. It's just like that. It's like, you're scum of the earth. You just need to take your life. Everybody be better. And those thoughts were real. They were real. And I just wish that people would lighten up on people, and if a person in their heart, I think we talked about this last time we did. I don't know anyone that's evil. I don't. I know there's evil people out there. I know there's people that are bad people, but there's a difference in someone being evil and bad. I've done bad things, but I don't ever remember being evil that you just think about. All you want to do is hurt people. All you would do is this type of thing. But if most people just realize God is in me, anything good in me is God, because without him, I wouldn't be good. And that's the truth. In my flesh, in my flesh dwells no good thing. And so, and I just need to allow him to live his life through me. And it's not a big burden to do. It's just like you were saying, it's just a surrender and saying, okay, Lord, whatever you want to do. And sometimes it's stop and help somebody fix a flat or picking up paper in your own yard so that your yard looks better. That's still a good thing. See, we don't look like that. We don't look at, and when my dad died, the place was packed. And I can't tell you how long I stood up there as people came by and told me how great my dad was.
Yeah.
He wasn't a churchgoer. He wasn't, a wasted life. Not at all. My dad didn't have a wasted life. And I, of course, you and I, we kind of come from a similar place. We're not real high on the church right now. I'm not, and because and so many times, it's back to what Jesus said. Well, you have heard it said, but I say to you, and what you hear so often is preachers are telling, I hear from God. I heard God say, I heard, and they elevate what, and everybody else sitting out there. Well, I don't hear God like that. Well, so you're feeling bad, or well, most of these preachers, they're getting paid to do a lot of that stuff. That's what they get paid to do. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. I've got a job to do out here. I've got a life to live, and that's just a little thing of mine that I remember hearing. It was a large church, and my son, we were listening to this preacher, and all he's talking about is kind of like how great of a dad and husband he was. And I turned to my son and said, he's headed for trouble. He's headed for trouble because you don't elevate your lifestyle, and thinking you're all of this. One, it just makes people feel bad. It just does, because not everybody, I pray, my wife and I pray every day for 30 minutes. A lot of men out there, I've never prayed with my wife at all. You see, there's things that we put out there, and I don't know necessarily know that they do it on a purpose to make people feel bad, but it goes back to, as we were talking, we started this, they use those things because you're growing if you're doing these things. So we're going to lay out the blueprint, things that you ought to be doing, and what works for one doesn't work for the other. I had a guy in my church in Florida. He didn't even own a car, all right, because he did triathlons. What do you say?
Triathlons, yeah.
Yeah, and he also did the Ironman. Guess what? He owned the Ironman, all right? He owned the company. And so he rode a bike or ran everywhere he went. He didn't own a car. And yet, he and I, we met every week. But we never talked about me not running. We never talked about me ever exercising. But that worked for him. It just worked for him. And I just think sometimes we take what worked for us and we think, you ought to do this, just like when I first became a Christian, I went to this preacher's house. I want to become a Christian. I don't know what to do. Don't know how. Well, what did I do? For the next 2 weeks, every night between 12:30 and 5:30 in the morning, I took my friends there, knocked on that same door. Here's some, because that's how I got saved. So sure, that's what they've got to do to get saved. Just kind of take them down. And it's not like that, and it's just not. And I believe strongly when the new covenant, and Jesus said, the Bible said clearly, I will put my spirit, my laws will be in your heart, and I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. You'll never have to worry about the wrath of God. I'm looking forward to that podcast, because a lot of people think that God's going to get on Sunday. And it clearly says that we have escaped the wrath of God. We don't have to worry about that. And God walks with you wherever you go. Doesn't matter whether you recognize He's with you or not. He's there. He's in your heart. God's Spirit bears witness with my spirit that I am the child of God. And you just know in your knower. Your lifestyle may be looking as corrupt as the old guy that's sitting in the jail cell somewhere, but you know in your knower, I know He's there. I know He's there. And He lets you know He's there, because He'll say, hey, we ought to not do that. Or you get that still small voice. And that's what, to me, that's what walking in with the Lord is just listen to that, your knower, and just listen to that, listen to Him, because that's Him. He'll always say, probably shouldn't do that. But we can, all right, we go ahead and do it, or we don't do it, whatever. And I just think that's the Spirit in us. I just think that's the Holy Spirit in us, just that still small voice, so.
Good stuff. Well, Donnie, so are you, just to kind of wrap it up, so your plan is to post some podcast or do a podcast, post it. Yep. And then I think she had set up for a Dropbox where we could post that. So I don't know. We just need to get with details. She did contact me, but she'll send that to me.
And
I mean, I think that these are, not necessarily for this recording, but things you think about how exactly, if you want to add it to this podcast or we want to start a new one. But those are things to think about, and I'm excited and ready for that. I think that it will be that's what I've been wanting. I want us to be able to learn more and grow, and I think those are great. Those are great factors. So, man, I appreciate your time, and I think if you just take it on the very basic level, I think you're a great conversationalist, and I think.
Thanks.
And I told you this last time. I love listening to your stories, and I think that. I've realized that's something that really helps me is hearing other people's stories, like what they're going through and what they've done and what, it's not like trying to emulate or copy it, but it's the same. It's like kind of like what I said earlier. It's looking at the similarities, that is really, I think, key to a lot of like personal growth, when I look at your similarities, not our differences, I start to see, I think God brings to mind a lot of different things, And,
He does.
And those things are, if kind of what we were talking about earlier, that if you walk out feeling guilty from church service, just think of what the opposite of this. When you feel more free, when you feel love and freedom and truth, and, that right there is a big deal, know. And I listen to a lot of sermons, I have over the years. I've listened to a ton, either in person or through the internet or whatever. And, it's funny because I'll start this message and I'll not wake up, but I'll like realize, it's over 30 minutes later or whatever. And not even like, it doesn't seem like 30 minutes. And then like you and I talking, like we've been talking for over an hour, it's like, it does not seem like it's that amount of time. And I think that's God uses those people to really help you see the truth about your identity in Him. And, it doesn't mean every little word Donnie said was perfect.
That's right.
And right. Or Burl said was perfect. Yeah. Because I think that goes back to, you can nitpick it.
Yeah.
But if you look for the similarities, and in other words, another way to think about it is like, man, there is nuggets of truth all the way throughout that. Yeah. And you think about those truths, things that are from God that you spoke or, that you said, those can't be from anybody else but from God. I like to say, and you've heard people say, it's like, okay, there's some things that are Burl just thought, I make up in my head. Well, those things you could probably just throw away, kind of like me making an offhanded comment. You just got to throw that away.
Well, I used to say, I hope you get a nugget today that you can take home. That's all you used to say. I hope you get a nugget.
But I think that's what you got to look for. And I think that, you can feel the differences. If you can feel the guilt and the shame well, you can definitely feel the truth and the love and the
Well,
God.
I know what happened to me through this is that I think my life at one time was built on a lot of things, a lot of principles, a lot of things, and they weren't bad things, but I've come to two things for my life is love never fails. All right. Mm-hmm. That's a winner. And James, it says, and mercy triumphs over judgment. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a winner right there. To me, that's a winner. If a person will say, love never fails, so that's a winner. And mercy triumphs over judgment, so that's also a winner. It triumphs over judgment. And that's what I just really that's what I try to focus on when I'm talking to people or when I'm trying to, just live life is, love will never fail and mercy triumphs over judgment. And my big deal, because I was in a bondage of a religious kind of bondage for 20 years. I tried 20 years to be a good Christian. I mean, I worked hard at it and broke out in hives every 4 to 6 weeks, 17 of those 20 years because trying to be a good Christian. But when I got set free and you felt it inside, like once you see the truth of grace and love, you can't unsee it. But so my whole thing is I just love seeing people set free. And I'll end with this story. All right. I was with a pastor and an associate and we were having lunch somewhere and they both really enjoyed drinking beer. That's just something that they just enjoyed so much. And I talked to them about being free. I talked to them about, and yet people around their home, they wouldn't do that. But when they got on the road, so I talked to them about, that you're putting yourself in a bondage, something. I'm personally don't like beer, never have, never liked it, and my body just won't let me drink. I've tried that, it won't work. But it doesn't bother me. I don't cuss, but it doesn't bother me for other people cuss at all. Just none of it bothers me. So came time for lunch, and this is a true story. We're in a Mexican restaurant. It came time for lunch, and they both ordered a beer. And I started crying because I knew something got set free right there in them. And sometimes freedom, to get free, you have to go at those things that kept you locked down. You have to tackle those things. You make yourself, I'm going to do that because that's a bondage that I've put myself in or the church put me in. And for me to get set free, I've got to do that. And I mean, it was emotional for me because I love seeing people being set free. I just do. Because it is for freedom that Christ set us free, and that's, he came to set us free. And, I'm just trusting that my part in this, my little part in this is that people will write to you or you'll hear from or whatever. And they'll say, man, I got set free. Because that's the greatest compliment I could ever hear. And I was in Mexico City and I was all these pastors there. And I made this statement. I said, well, some of you just need to go out and have a good day of sinning. And I paused and I said, to get the self-righteousness out of you, But I know how preachers are. I was there, and so anyway, I had talked about the difference in the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. That was a big deal. And we took like a 2 o'clock lunch break and we came back and there was a time of questions. And there's a little guy on the back, all the way in the back. He stood up, raised his hands and said, today I have been set free.
Wow.
He said, a year ago, my oldest son stopped walking with the Lord. And I set myself down as the pastor because he went by the letter of it. Your children need to be this and that. He said, I set myself down. He said, but tomorrow I will be back in my pulpit. And
Yeah,
I tell you, it was incredible. I found out his church was over 2,000 people.
Wow.
And that I couldn't have asked for. Today, I have been set free. And okay, so anyway, that's to me, that's what the new covenant and the grace message.
Love it. Love it. Well, Donnie, I sure appreciate you, brother. And
I look forward to being in Elk City.
And again, for people listening, it's like go to the website evenoneless.com. That'll give you more information. And also, Donnie, we will need, if you can at some point reach out to Emily and she can help get your information on the website. I'm probably not using the right term, but I want to use something like a tab or whatever. In other words, where you have a part of the website. And where they can reach out to you, they can email you, or they can contact you. And so just work with her on getting that, because I would love for people to be able to, when they have questions for you too, that you can respond. Sure. And I think that'll be important. And I really think those are the two aspects that you and I can work on, is just making the website where we can have those contact information, and also show your resources as you do the podcast and you do things that they can see that stuff. So, but anyway,
yes, and y'all can edit this out if need be. But what I was thinking about doing, and at the end of the podcast, take just a few minutes and tell my life story in a chronological way. I tell people, hey, at the end, and I'd start back, and I don't use the last 2 or 3 minutes just to tell, I was born here, then up to tell my story. It wouldn't be part of the podcast, but it'd be at the end of the podcast. What do you think?
I think it's great. I think that more and more personalized stories that we can do in personal, I think that's what changes lives. It's like you're saying, it's the same concept of it's easy for us to put up on the website or in our podcast, here's what you need to do to basically get where you want to go. And here's the order. But none of us believe that. It's like, if you want to follow my path, you're going to have a lot of problems and failures and whatever. And I think that's life. That's it.
Yeah.
In other words, but if I tell my story and say how I got set free or how I overcame this, and we both know that it points to God. It absolutely does. But even inside it, I ask questions because I've struggled with it. When I ask about prayer or how to grow spiritually, it's because those are things that I still think about and I still struggle with. And I think when we talk about our personalized story, I always put it that way. It becomes relatable and nobody can refute it. Nobody. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's way different than yes, I believe you're going to do some teaching, and that's wonderful. But I also believe that even inside those teaching is your personal story.
That's right.
And that personal story matters. You have a great message, and that message is seeped in your life story.
Yeah.
And again, back to if we look at what similarities we have, not our differences. Mm-hmm. Somebody could easily, look at ours and just pick out the differences. Well, I think that if you really search for the similarities in your story, it's there. Every time you and I talk, I'm like, man, I can relate to that.
That's right. That's right.
And so I think you putting your testimony in there at the end or wherever you want to put it is absolutely perfect. And I'll be getting with you soon about our event and just kind of, I do want to, we got to work through kind of what the agenda on that is and what it looks like. But I want to make sure I invite you guys September 16th, 6:00, Elk City, Oklahoma. Again, the invitation and all that's on the website or our Facebook, which is Even One Less. And by the way, I think I told you, Donnie, that I am banned from Facebook right now. So I don't want you to think I'm banned it's a long story, but it was kind of a scam and now they banned me off of it. So it's not something I really did, but it's some kind of scam so I think I've lost my personal Facebook forever. So if you see a friend request from me in the near future, because I'm going to have to start a new one. So
wow,
yeah, you're not seeing me interact.
Hope to get to see a bunch of people that I know out there, and anyway, it'd be good. So.
And hopefully, Donnie, if you need it, like I have the invitation also in electronic form, which is really a nice form. But I can, if I haven't, we can text it to you. But it's great to share. So maybe even the people that you're able to invite.
That way you'll kind of know who is coming, but you can still have this opinion. Yeah.
I think it's more importantly, I want people to know you're coming. You know what I mean? And I think that the people that know you, if they heard you were coming, they're gonna want to come see you. So I think that's the deal. All right, brother. Have a good day.
All right, be blessed. Okay.
See you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Positively Undefeated. If there was something in this show that resonated with you, please share the show with your community. If you want this show delivered each Monday morning to your podcast app of choice, please subscribe or follow. And if you'd like to get a hold of Burl, please do so by going to burlstricker.com/contact.